You've entered Bookstorm. Your favorite authors are here to dive down deep into their best-selling books. Stay tuned to brave the storm.
Welcome back to Bookstorm Podcast. I'm your co-host, Kristen Civiletto, and I'm thrilled to be here today. We know that you're joining in from 105 countries and territories and all 50 states, and we know why. It is because we are bringing you the very best authors out there today, and today is no exception. We're just thrilled because we have back to the show #1 New York Times bestselling author Christina Baker Kline and award-winning author Anne Burt. Welcome, Christina and Anne. We're so excited to have you back.
Thank you. We're thrilled to be here.
Well, I love that you were on the show before for your individual novels, and we had a wonderful conversation about each of those. I encourage everyone to go back and listen if they haven't already. But to have you together, to me, this is powerhouse writing team. Is it true I saw in People magazine that you've been friends for 25 years?
Crazy. We've been friends. We've been collaborators. We had babies at the same time. We were pushing strollers together when we lived in a suburb of New York City. We both lived there. Now we both live in New York City, and our children are in their 20s. So we've had a really long friendship. Yeah.
And
But this,
it was all based, our friendship started with writing and books. It blossomed in so many other directions too. And it's just so exciting at this stage of our long friendship to be writing them together. It's great.
yeah. Well, despite all of that history, this is your first novel together. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
we have a nonfiction book called About Face. We asked women writers to look in the mirror and talk about what they see. And it's filled with diverse voices and all kinds of perspectives. And it was really exciting to work on that together. Doing that book taught us that we really have a similar editing style,
Yeah.
and that we have sort of the same sensibility. And we were also in a book club together, so we've read many, many hundreds of books together over the years. All of that kind of led us to realize that we could meld our voices together and create something new with a book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And we're going to talk all about the book that we're here to talk about in a minute. And I do want to tell our listeners, though, just a little bit about your background. But first of all, I'm going to show this beautiful cover on Please Don't Lie. This is the collaboration. Fantastic. You do bring, I could see where you have a seamless writing style together, but you bring a little bit of a different sensibility in terms of you come from a different genre, each of you, but it makes it a more in-depth book. I think that's, what I noticed and picked up knowing your individual writing.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, Anne, I want to start with you because your first novel, The Dig, and I have a copy of it over here behind me. Fantastic. It was a March 2023 American Booksellers Association Indie Next Pick. And it was one of those books where it stays with you a very long time. I still think about that book. So it's pretty awesome. And I encourage our listeners to listen to it or to read it. It was a mystery selection of the month. Now, you also have a background in editing. You are the editor of My Father Married Your Mother, Dispatches from the Blended Family. And that's something with your co-editor, Christina, one of your projects together, from what I understand. And then, Christine, you had mentioned the book About Face. Women write about what they see when they look in the mirror. And what a cool concept. And I think from a standpoint of relevance today, that's a really important book. So I love that you did that project together.
Yeah, I think it sort of foreshadowed this topic that we love, which is writing about women in the current moment. And that's what Please Don't Lie is about. It's looking at the self-help movement and books and women's reliance on advice that might be positive and might not be positive for them in various ways. And the follow-up to Please Don't Lie that we're working on now, coming out at the end of next year, is about the trad wife movement. So we're just having a blast writing about kind of contemporary culture and
Yeah.
in a analytical way, I think a psychologically driven way.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating, actually.
Both Please Don't Lie and our next book are set in this fictional town of Crystal River, New York, which is in the heart of the Adirondack Mountains. So Christina and I have created a world in Crystal River that we can populate with all of these ideas and people and things that we want to explore. And we are just really feeling just so generative and juicy about the possibilities of this town we've imagined into being.
I love it. I love it. And I can see some of that shaping up already because we have some strong personalities that you allude to in the book or that are peripheral characters. So I'm seeing that. Well, Anne, you have essays and fiction that have appeared in many different publications and venues. Just a few of them on NPR, the Christian Science Monitor, Salon, and you've won the Meridian Editors Prize in Fiction. So I just want to let our readers know they love to hear a little bit about your background. I know you live in New York City, and we're just so excited that you're joining the show. Now, Christina, I want to tell a little bit about your background as well. And again, we have talked to you on the show about The Exiles, one of your very popular books, but you've got, is it 8 novels before this one?
Yes, 8 novels. That's right.
Okay. Okay. And you're #1 New York Times bestselling author. The Exiles is also one of those books that stays with you. It was about the founding of the modern state of Australia. And it was shocking to me. I didn't know any of that when I read that book, but it was also entertaining in the sense you couldn't stop reading it. So again, we're going to encourage everyone to pick that up. Now, you have books published in 40 countries. You've received numerous prizes, the New England Prize for Fiction, the Maine Literary Award, Barnes and Noble Discover Award, and you've also been chosen for the One Book, One Read selections by many community organizations. And your essays and articles and reviews have appeared in many different publications as well, from the New York Times Book Review, Washington Post, the Boston Globe. And I love, love, love that you also support writers in many different capacities, including through scholarships and other mentoring type roles, which is just fantastic.
Thank you. I think Anne and I both feel really strongly that supporting young writers, we both have taught over the years, mentoring people. It's a hard life to be a writer and to figure out your way in the world. And I think trying to make sure that the next generation is moving forward. I want to show you a student of mine just sent me this is her manuscript, but it's coming out next year. It's called The Wild Beneath. So it's just exciting to see the next generation come along and, be published and have success. It's fun.
It's got to be energizing for you both as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we've had a number of authors on our show who have provided blurbs on this one. And I'm going to say there's a lot of buzz about this. And I love what Lisa Scottolini said, who's been on the show as well. This twisty, turny tale kept me breathless. I loved it. I agree. Very briefly, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but I want to tell our listeners, this is a very haunting, very atmospheric book. And it, as you mentioned, it's set deep in the Adirondacks. And I love that wild and feral aspect we're going to get into with some of our questions. But we meet Haley Stone. She is newly married and she is seeking to start out fresh in this kind of remote area with her new husband. It was his family home, and they're in the midst of a renovation. She's still kind of healing from some circumstances in her past. But as they run into people in town, as a neighbor comes along, this secret starts spilling out about a lot of things. And it's just this idea of trust being challenged in a new marriage. It just ratchets up as the book progresses. Now, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but would you add anything just background wise before we get into it?
Sure, about Haley going into this world that she's going into. I don't think it's a spoiler at all to say that the book opens on the heels of some very, very tragic events in Haley's family of origin. Her parents, who live in Florida in a gated community, were killed 2 years before the start of the book in a house fire. And even more recently, just about 18 months earlier, her younger sister, who was an addict, OD'd under very complicated circumstances. And Haley is grieving. She's feeling very alone. She had left her home in Florida 10 years earlier to move to New York and made a good life for herself in New York, but she felt like she wasn't there when all of these terrible tragedies happened. And that's really weighing on her at the beginning of the book. When she met Brandon in Florida, actually at her sister's funeral, um, they fell in love. And this felt like an opportunity for a real fresh start for her. And it feels like to Haley, the way to get away from not only the tragedies of her past, but now the local journalists from Florida who are hounding her because they're sensationalizing the story. They want to get her in on it. She feels kind of like they're almost predators in her life in New York. So this all leads her to say, fresh start, new love. Brandon inherits unexpectedly his father's family home after his father's death in the Adirondacks, and they say, let's go. And that's where we start.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that she had a lot of tragic circumstances in the previous 2 years. So I want to ask you about that. She was making some major life choices from a position of vulnerability. And there does come a point in the story, and I don't think this is a spoiler, where she starts to have some concerns and some doubts about her new husband. That is a sickening feeling. I understand this feeling where you're like, wait a minute, is there something more that I don't know? Now, she had been warned against making life choices when she was still grieving and still, dealing with a lot of stuff. And I want to ask you about that. When you have that sickening feeling of, did I just make a mistake? Do I know this person? What do you do?
Well, I'll take the first stab at it. I think that Haley chose to take herself away with her husband. But what that meant is that she had none of her usual kind of help meets and safety nets around her. She was completely alone now, suddenly in the Adirondacks. Her best friend is still back in New York, very questioning all of Haley's choices. Why in the world are you going to this remote place where you don't know anyone? Um, and so, as one does, Haley reaches out and wants to make a friend and have new relationships. She's reliant on her husband for so much because it's the town he grew up in. So I think it's a really common thing for people to make quick friendships and then share things that without quite knowing the other person as well as they might. And that's what happens to our Haley. Anne and I just loved creating this character because she's smart, but she's also really vulnerable. And because she has no one around who really knows her, she's struggling. And so she's trying to make friends and she's trying to open up, but at the same time, she's been wounded. So it was fascinating to have this character to develop um, who was getting feedback from people she didn't know very well about. So when she was telling them things about her life, to have her wrestle with whether the advice is useful or not and whether it helps her get to the next stage was part of our journey for her in the book.
Yeah.
I think too, part of this vulnerability, this moment of Haley's life that we're examining, that leads her into the thicket that you're describing, Kristen, of what do you do, is a very common feeling for people in all kinds of circumstances. Whatever new phase of life or transition you're entering into, whether of your own volition or because life has thrown you into it, there's that opportunity and that fear kind of fighting each other. The opportunity is, this is new and I can be new or make new decisions. If I've made the wrong decisions in the past, maybe I make different ones. But then there is that sense of like, who do I trust because who do I know? And at this point, is it all in my head? Am I mistrusting other people because I'm really mistrusting myself? So all of these are really complicated and very familiar experiences in our lives.
Well, she also experienced something that I think a lot of people do, and that is when she brought up a few of her concerns to a person who'd already voiced major concerns, you almost feel like, oh, is this validating what they were saying? Are they going to be unbiased? And you're almost uncomfortable going to your very best friend and saying, maybe you were right.
Right. That questioning is something that Anne and I loved playing with in the novel. Having Haley express things to people and their responses being quite strong and opinionated. And then
Yes.
Haley herself has to figure out what she really believes, what she feels, what the right answer is. And she's never quite sure of some of the characters' motivations, and the reader is not quite sure either. So it's all a kind of it's part of what I think keeps you on your toes in this book, is that everyone's motivations are pretty complicated.
Yes. Well, along those lines, there's another theme that runs through your story about this idea of complicated grief, where you've experienced a loss, but it's also tinged with some anger or disappointment. And again, I'm not going to give anything away, but there's more than one angle where this comes into play. But I want to ask you about this little discussed aspect of grief, this complicated grief. Why'd you go there, and what are some things you want to share about that?
And that's such an interesting question and a rich question, truly. There's almost back to this idea that self-help and the self-help industry, which we really look carefully at in this book, often is used for many people, but women especially, in moments of need for guidance. Haley in particular as a character doesn't have any maternal figures. There are self-help gurus that we've made up in this book, but coming from real life, who push and pull her in different ways to address grief, among other things. But the complicated aspect of grief, the sort of the more nuanced piece of it, where it is layered with other things, I think often that's what gets lost in the more prescriptive ways that people are looking for, like a way to say a mantra to get out of bed that morning, a mantra to get through the day. Sometimes you need those proscriptive things because sometimes you do have to just put one foot in front of the other. But it's never the case that I think the other more nuanced parts of it don't come back in some way to get you. The fun thing about the genre that we're working in, the psychological thriller for Please Don't Lie, is that we can play that out in an extreme way. It's not a fun human emotion, complicated grief laced with anger, but it is something that we can entertain the reader with in terms of thinking about the consequences blowing up into things that you would never imagine in the container of a book that's also a real page turner. So we're playing with both of those things. How do you deal with very, very complex human emotions? And there our literary writer backgrounds really do come into play. And how do you feed that into a page turning thriller? It's a really interesting combination.
Yeah. And I also loved that there was an absence of mother figures, grandmothers for advice, because it was almost a stand-in in today's society where younger people are not necessarily turning to the older or the elder people in their family for advice and guidance and mentoring. But here we see what fills in that vacuum.
Definitely, isolation was such a big theme in this book. Taking Haley, who had already lost her family, putting her in New York City, where she actually had quite a vibrant life, and then taking her out of that and putting her in this isolated town with this husband who may or may not be telling her the truth about his past, for example. That was just a great kind of joyful thing to work on with Anne. We rented an Airbnb for a week in the Adirondacks, right in the same area that Haley lives in, although Crystal River is made up, but we kind of know where it is. And we explored this theme, and we literally explored it together. We walked down these dirt roads together, and we've, of course, explored it psychologically in the book.
Yeah. Well, I want to pick up there because, the natural world was a perfect backdrop for this story for that and for many other reasons. First of all, there was a feral aspect, much like Brandon in the story. And you see where he's trying to connect with and express that part of himself. And I was wondering if you thought it was important to bring everything back to survival in the wilderness for her or Hallie to figure out where she's going next.
Absolutely. I mean, we took her out of New York City and we placed her in an environment that the sort of ferality that you're talking about
Yeah.
speaks to Brandon, both from his childhood and the nature of who he is as a person. And it has the opposite effect on Haley. It absolutely terrifies her. So she's confronted environmentally with what she is confronted with psychologically. So those two things are playing out in her exterior world and her interior world, and they're fighting each other. You know, they're not complementing each other, but they are forcing her into a corner. And from that corner, she has no choice but to act in order to understand how to move forward, how to get herself out of this situation.
Yeah. I have to say too, I spent a lot of time in the Adirondacks. That's one of the reasons why I love this book so much, because it is very atmospheric, as I mentioned. But I remember once being at campground and we knew there was a bear in the campground. There was a little sign warning everybody. Every noise I heard that night, in my mind went
Yeah.
10,000 places because it's dark, it's quiet, there's a twig crinkling, and you're like, your mind takes over. And that's what was kind of happening to Haley here, right?
Well,
As she,
it's yes, absolutely. While we were working on the book together, my husband and I visited friends in upstate New York, and Anne and I were kind of trying to wrestle with the question of coyotes in the book.
yeah,
As you know, there are coyotes that are in the woods, um, and all of a sudden one night we heard this howling that then was joined by other howling. I think I called Anne and put it on speaker because it was so loud and it was so creepy, and there were so many coyotes howling that I said to Anne, if we put this in the book, no one would believe it. It's kind of amazing that it's still that exists. So in a lot of ways, we didn't even have to ratchet up the scariness of the Adirondacks. That it already exists, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And even from a sensory standpoint, there's kind of a go back to basics. What are you seeing? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? And we have a lot of that in the story because it was really juxtaposed with the psychological aspects of what was happening, and they were just feeding one another. So that's very well done. And you had mentioned something in the beginning I want to go back to, and that is about the social media aspect, because there was another theme here where, lives were being sensationalized and under a microscope. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how that exacerbates a difficult life circumstance for many people, including Haley.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, boy, Haley is not alone. It is such an echo chamber, and also beyond an echo chamber, it can be the most intrusive thing. I think any of us who are in the world in any way have a glimpse of what that could do. One of the things that was really interesting for us to explore as writers about this theme of social media pursuing you is how boundaryless it is. Haley moves. She literally moves several times. She leaves Florida. She leaves New York. She goes to this house. Every time she thinks, okay, I'm leaving the oppressive nature of my past, and it finds her. It finds her in a million ways because all you need is a signal and it can get through in some way. And sometimes in this book, it's too late. Like once the damage of social media is done, it's a little bit like the anecdote that you just told us about hearing the bear. And every noise is amplified in your head because you know there's a bear out there. In Haley's case, many noises are amplified in her head because she was chased by excuse the expression, podcast host.
Yes.
A very different kind of podcast host, but somebody who was out for her own advancement as well, using Haley's family tragedies to get more views and get more followers. And so Haley hears that bear everywhere.
Yes. Yes. It was like another predator. You're right. And it was one of the scarier ones because I kept thinking in my head throughout the story. And again, it's hard to not give away spoilers, but I kept thinking to myself, isolate, run away, don't talk to that person because you don't know who is recording you or looking for content. And that was very well
That
done.
that sense of betrayal that we were playing with throughout, where you don't know what people want from you. You're not sure if someone wants you for you, wants to be friends with you for you, or because there's something they can get out of that relationship. And Haley was not only was she alone in the world, but she was in this vulnerable position of being hounded by the paparazzi for who wanted to take advantage of her story. So that was really interesting material for us to work on.
Yeah. Well, it sounds too like you're exploring that further in the story that you're working on. Did you say that's a book we can expect next year?
Yep, it's due out the end of 2026. And it's going to be also set in Crystal River, as I think we mentioned. And we can't say too much about it because it would be spoilers for this one, but there are some characters that you meet in Please Don't Lie who you're going to get to know better in the next.
Excellent. Oh, I can't wait. And I hope you come back on the show to talk about it
We'd
because
love to.
I want to show our listeners this really amazing cover. It really does. It's one of those covers that really does evoke the feeling in the book. And I'm going to encourage everybody to run out and buy it and read it. You're going to enjoy it. You'll love talking about it. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to tell our listeners how to find each of you. You each have a wonderful website, AnnBurtWriter.com. And we also have ChristinaBakerKline.com. And you both engage with people. You've got all kinds of things that people can explore on your site. But just thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about this fantastic book. We're excited for you.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
All right, listeners, what a fantastic discussion with Christina and Anne. We just adore them. Their writing, absolutely pick up this book. And in fact, there's a little surprise if you have the hardcover version. So make sure you look underneath the book cover at the hardcover itself. We're going to show a picture of that at some point. But you know where you can find us. We're at bookstormpodcast.com. You can find us on TikTok, on X, on Instagram. We have our YouTube where you can find us as well. And you can also see these fantastic authors. So we hope that you are tuning in and spreading the word and spreading those links. We have a lineup this summer and early fall that is so amazing. Gareth Brown, The Society of Unknowable Objects, Mary Alice Monroe, Where the Rivers Merge, Daniel Silva, An Inside Job, Don Winslow, The Final Score, Lou Burney with Crooks, Joanne Harris with the prequel to Chocolat called Vienne, and Isabella Maldonado and Jeffrey Deaver, The Grave Artist, Elma Katsu with Fiend, Laura Griffin with Innocence Road. We're just so excited to talk to these authors, and we know why you're coming back here again and again. It's because your favorite authors are here on the show on Bookstorm Podcast.